Hi, I'm Donelle McAdams, and today I want to show you how to use the Bound to Fit tool to make your binding and also to attach it to your project. So I have a block here that I have already template quilted, and I am going to show you how we are going to prepare our binding. So let's just lay that aside for right now. I have cut my binding strips 2.5 inches wide. And so what I've done here is I've layered them all up, and I need to go ahead and use the Bound to Fit tool so that I can cut these so they'll join very easily. So what I'm going to be doing is, as you can see, we've got an edge right here that's on the back also, and that will lay right up against. Now, it just so happens that this is perfect at 2.5, but even if it weren't and your binding was cut wider, then you would be able to just do the first cut and then move it up. So you'll notice down at this end right here, there is a short little 1/4 inch so that it's going to go together very easily. So I am going to cut that straight that way. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go across this direction. Now, the one thing that I did not mention was the fact that I need for these to all be face up. So now I'm going to turn the other ends around and we're going to have them all face up. We're going to put that on just like this, and we're going to cut those the same way. Now, I don't want this selvage in there, so I'm coming away from that. I'm holding this in place, straight off there, and right across there. So that is what we need to do to prepare to get started. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be doing some sewing. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And you would need to calculate how much you needed as far as how many strips. And I know this is way more than I need. And I'm going to just press this just a second here because we've got some wrinkles that are going to cause us an issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these. So I lay that on here, and then another one. And what I do is, you can see this is going to go together like this to make a long strip. And because of the way that we have cut these, it's just super easy to line those up. You can see it just lines up right across there. And so I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to join those together. Now, I like to do as much work as I can at one point, so I'm just finding the other end of this piece and laying it right here, and then we'll turn this one onto it and lay that down so it all matches up. Turn that at my angle and do my 1/4 inch. And so then, once I get finished, I can just come back with my small scissors and cut those apart. And you can see how nice that lays. And this is just nice and even across there. At this point, I'm going to use my iron, and I'm going to be pressing this open right here because that will spread out the thickness as we're making our binding. So we're just going to turn right around here at the ironing board, and I'm going to find that first one. I always like to press the seam flat first. That's called setting the seam. And then I'm simply going to open that up with my fingers. That's easier said than done many times. And get the nose of my iron so that I can just press that seam open. So I've got that one ready to go. I'm going to come down here and we're going to get this one opened. Well, that seemed a whole lot easier, didn't it? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure my creases are pressed out, because I'm going to show you now how to use what's called the Sasher tool. And we will be able to use it right here on the ironing board. If you have trouble getting a crease out, these are coming out real easy. You can use like Best Press or Flatter or Quilter Starch Savvy. Lots of different things that you can use to get those creases out. Now you can tell this is probably way longer than I need, but we're going to show you how we are going to use what's called the Sasher tool. So we need to turn this so it's in half. So I'm just going to start about 6 inches of this so that that's pressed. And then this was 2.5 inches wide to start. So when it's pressed in half, we need the 1 1/4 Sasher tool. So this is what it looks like. It can be purchased individually. It's by Pauline. And that's the easiest way to find it, is to mention Pauline, because she is the one that designed it. And like I said, you can get them in all different widths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that where I started it. I'm going to use a fork pin to put right in my ironing board, and I'm just pushing this down to get that started. And so all I'm going to be doing now is holding it together and pushing that down. Pull it back this way. When you're doing it, you're not going to be right under a camera, so you're going to be able to do it as long as your ironing board, actually. But this template here, don't buy the knockoffs because they'll melt. This one, you can put it right up against the iron, and you're going to be able to just go right down the line. Oh, I got my pen too close that time. So we're just going to put it right up against there. Hold that in place. Best thing I have found for folding these. So we're going to come back, repin. I'm going to throw this over to the other side of the ironing board so it doesn't keep getting tangled up, and push that a little ways forward. And we're now down to where our seam was, where we seamed that together. Not a problem. It's going to go right over that seam. Pull this back. Unfortunately, this is something that I kind of have to do. I couldn't do it ahead, because then you wouldn't have been able to see how the pieces go together. So this just makes it very easy. And the Sasher tools, Megan, if you want to get them out of the cabinet there right behind you, we'll show them what the whole set looks like. So that's the whole set of the Sasher tools, and you can see they go very, very tiny to rather large. And like I said, you can get just one, you can get the whole set. It just depends on what you're needing. I use this one a lot because it's usually what I'm making my binding with. So that's the set of Sasher tools. And show them up close, the name there, so that they can see that. I think you'll love them once you get used to all the different ways you can use them, because it doesn't have to be just pressing in half. You can fold this so that your fold is to the center. It's just all in how you start it, how you're going to be able to use them. So just that quickly, I've done 120 inches because that was 3 strips of 40-inch wide fabric. So we've got that all together there. And so now we will be able to attach this to that block. So give us a second here, and we're going to turn back this direction. So I won't be using this again until the end. So when we're doing this, of course, the whole idea of this is to put this on a large quilt too. So I'm going to show you how I would do this on this small piece. So I've got that 1/4 of an inch foot on, and I've already stitched around 1/8 of an inch on my block. And when I'm doing like the quilt as you go method, that's the way I do it. I always have that 1/8 inch stitch there. So I'm going to be assuming that you did the quilt as you go. If you did not do quilt as you go, you can take a wider, more like a 3/8 inch seam. But I am going to show you the 1/4 inch, because if you had done this as a quilt as you go, you might have a flying goose that comes out here. You have a point that you don't want to lose. Now, the whole idea of this is we need to leave about 10 to 12 inches open. And all of that information is right on the tool. The tool will tell you that. And it does come with an instruction sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave about that much open. So what I'm going to do, so I'm reminded of that, is I'm just going to take something and mark here and mark there so that I know to leave that extra space there. So we are going to leave about 15 inches, and we are going to start right here. I am going to put it on the front because my intentions are is to take it to the back. It will overlap, and then I can stitch in the ditch from the front and catch the back. Or I can hand stitch it. Now you can also put it on the back and bring it to the front and stitch it from the front. So either way is going to work for you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this right here. I'm going to come right to this edge and set my foot down. And I'm going to stitch forward, and I'm going to reverse, so that I have secured that at that position. Now when I get down here, I am going to stop at 1/4 of an inch, and I am going to show you how we're going to work with that. So I'm going to mark that 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to stitch to that pin. There we go. I'm going to slow my machine down a little bit. And then I'm going to take the pin out and I'm going to lift the foot with the needle still in. And you can see I've got this here at a good 45-degree angle. But all I have to do is look at the line on, and in this case, on my cutting mat, or not my cutting mat, my glider, and I know that I've got that, and it's back here behind. I think you can see that. So I've got that 45, and then I'm just stitching off. Go ahead and cut it. You're going to see this 4 times because I got 4 corners. At that point, we just simply turn it back like this, and then turn it back on itself so that it's even right on this edge. And if you didn't catch that, guess what? We got 3 more corners. So then all I need to do is start stitching again. I am going to reverse there so that it catches that. And I'm going to stitch right down this side with my 1/4 of an inch. Don't stretch either your binding or your project. You don't want that stretched. So here we come. We're close to this corner here. So I'm going to take my pen again, And I'm going to put it in so that it's 1/4 of an inch away. There we go. Take that out. Leave the needle in. Find that 45. Right back here on the back is the easiest one. And then stitch to the corner and off. Now you have to get to that 1/4 of an inch or it's not going to work for you. So I'm going to turn this up like this. So this makes that 45 clear out to the corner. And then I'm turning this back so that the edge or that fold is right on the edge of the side we just did. Put this back in place, a few stitches forward, a few stitches back. I guess I went farther back than I thought I did. There we go. And 1/4 of an inch. Now, one thing I failed to mention when I started, and it won't matter because now it's you know, you're just watching and you won't forget this like I did. Always make sure that you test out so you don't end up with where your join is on a corner. Because if you end up with where that join is on a corner, you've got so much fabric in that corner, it's not going to make a nice miter corner when you turn. So now we're coming to this corner. I'm going to get a jump on this one. I'm going to go ahead and get that put in beforehand. Keeping your 1/4 of an inch even. One more stitch. Take that out. Pick up the foot and get that 45. Go ahead and cut the thread. We're going to turn this back so that we've got that 45 coming right to the corner. We're going to flip this one back in so that the fold is right on the edge. It's one of those things that kind of takes extra hand to do it, but you can do it. We're going to come forward, take just a couple of stitches back. So I got one more corner to show you here. Now, as I said, I'm doing 1/4 of an inch because I'm assuming that you're doing this on the Quilt As You Go blocks, which only have 1/4 of an inch allowance. But if you're going to be doing something larger, then you just need to, move your foot. I mean, I shouldn't say larger, but wider. You're going to have your foot over probably at 3/8, so you may be using the regular presser foot instead of your 1/4 of an inch. So I'm coming right up to that mark, pulling that needle out, turning it for my 45. And of course, to use that 45 on the mat, you have to have your needle centered here. Your needle must be right in line here, or your 45 won't work. We're going to turn this back. Almost forgot what I was doing there. To the 45. And then back this way. So we're flat on the corner. And this is my last side. So remember, I'm probably only stitching about 2 inches here to give us enough space. It's not even that much. So I'm going to stitch up to here, and I'm going to stitch back. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that thread. Now, at this point, we have a nice big opening here to work with. And our whole goal is we want to put these two guys together so that they form a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to lay it smooth just like that, and I'm going to decide, do I want it in the center? It doesn't really matter exactly where it is, but I'm just going to go ahead and say I want it in the center here. So I'm going to go ahead with that. I could either get my iron or the little wooden iron, or in this case, I'm going to use my seam roller so that I've got that good and flat. I'm going to bring this one right up to it, making sure everything is going to be smooth. And I'm going to have them come and just touch each other. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Now on this end, I've got way too much, so I'm just going to use my scissors and cut that off, because I've got, like, I don't know, 40 or 50 inches there, and I don't need it. And so at this point, we have these two creases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my chalk so you'll be able to see it real easily. And I'm going to open this up. So right there is my crease. Okay? And so I'm going to just do the same thing on this side. We'll open it up. And mark that crease. Now on this side, I'm going to need my cutting mat. I mean, on both sides I will, but we're going to do that one first. And so I'm going to lay this out flat this way. This is my left side. I'm going to lay it out flat this way, and on the tool there is a line right here. So I'm going to match up that line. Right there it is. Okay? I'm going to match that up. And I'm going to cut the same way I did before. This all seems too easy, to be honest with you, if you've ever tried doing all of this. And then on the other side, remember I'm working from the right side of the fabric. On the other side, I have that same thing marked, and we're going to set that underneath there that way. This is the right side, and I'm going to flip my bound to fit. I didn't flip it this way, I turned it around. So I should say rotate my bound to fit and put it right on that mark there. And I need to cut right up against. Now this is a bit awkward for me. If you had this on your cutting table, it would be a whole lot easier. But I think I've got that there. Looks like I missed just a smidge. Okay. So what we have done there is we have made the allowance for putting this together and it having meet up perfectly. All right? Now, you probably now know why that I said to leave 10 to 12 inches open. Because we need to have enough space to manipulate these two parts. So this is going to go together just like this. And so because it's on the bias, I don't want to do any stretching there. So I'm going to get a pen, couple of pens, and put in that so that as I'm trying to get it up and then underneath my foot to stitch it, I don't do any stretching. Because again, it's so nice to have that straight edge to put that right together like so. So let's get another straight pen here and put it in here. And then we'll get this totally out of the way. And we are going to stitch this together. So I'm going to come right here at that 1/4 of an inch. Lining that up without stretching it. Don't like to sew over pens, kind of went over that one, didn't I? So then when we turn this back over, that meets up perfectly. Now, so that we don't have to move our camera again, I'm just going to open this up and use my roller to roll that out. but you could take it to the ironing board and press it. I'm just going to roll it out. So now what we're going to be able to do is put this right back together and come back up here to where we stopped stitching. Make sure we've got it right on that edge. And so the Bound to Fit tool was really designed just for what I just showed you. But I'll tell you what, I use it to do all of my 45-degree joins like you saw there. So I'm back to where I started, with a little back stitch there. And I'm going to go ahead and cut those threads. So now at this point, remember this is our right side. When we turn this over, if I just bring this to that stitching, I could do a hand stitch right there. And I'm going to show you how to do that hand stitch. But a lot of people get all upset because they're like, well, there's extra space here that doesn't have this fabric in it. It doesn't matter. It's still a binding. It's secured on both sides. But if you wanted to, you could turn this clear in. It's going to be that wide on this side, but only this wide on this side. And that's why I don't like, this is just a bit skinny for me. So I like to have mine out like this, so that it's going to be wider on this side. So if you wanted to do this to stitch it on, you would turn this just past that stitch line, come to the right side and stitch in the ditch right along here. So I'm going to show you how that's done on this side, and then I'm going to show you how I would hand stitch it. So you would turn it like this, and when I'm stitching in the ditch with my 1/4 inch foot, I just move my needle over just a little bit so that I can just go right down that ditch and stitch in the ditch. Okay? So when I'm stitching in the ditch, right there's where it was done. You can't see that. And right here on the back, I put white thread in so that you could see it. So, yeah, you'd probably want to try and get a little straighter than I did there. But remember, it's on the ditch from the front, and you can't see anything there. So it is still caught on both sides. All right? Now, I know you want to see how the corners are done, and then I'm going to show you the hand stitching. So the corners are going to be turned around. If you were doing that ditch stitching, you'd be stitching them a little bit, or turning it a little bit farther. And then you're simply going to take this, pull this side around. I would have pinned this side and this side, and then I do my miter in the corner. And so it's going to miter on this side, and it's going to miter on that side. And you can still do that ditch stitching if you're doing that. Now, let me quickly show you how I would hand stitch this, because a lot of people want to know the way to hand stitch. And I think it's easier just to show you. The first thing I will tell you is that you want to do this with a single thread. You do not want to use a doubled thread. So when I do this, I am going to have a hard time getting the needle threaded. So what I'm going to do is, this is the way I tie a knot in a needle. So I'm going to put this gold here so you can see it. I'm right-handed, so I'm laying it over this way, and I simply cross it like it's an X, and I put my thumbnail over that, or thumb over it, and go around like 3 or 4 times, and then shoot this up through my fingers like it's a rocket. And because of the way I did it, I pulled it completely out. We'll try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and pull it down between your fingers. Shoot it up through like a rocket. There we go. So then I have this nice little neat knot at the bottom. That one's got a little tag along, but that's actually okay because that means it's really tight. And I am going to cut this off so I've still got that little bit of a tail. And so what I'm going to be doing is securing that. Let's go over to this side. Megan, you might want to move that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this first because I'm going to come in behind here and I'm going to secure that. So I'm going to pull that in like this. That's not going to matter because it's going to get covered. And I'm going to then take just another small stitch like that. So that thread is good and secure. And so now I'm going to turn this over, and you can use either your little wonder clips or pins or whatever to hold your work in place, but you really only need like 3 of them because you're just going to work a little bit ahead each time when you turn that. So we're right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and thread. Always have this fun little thing, don't we? I'm going to take my needle and thread. I'm going to go right beside where my edge is, and then I'm going to go in the fold just a little bit and come out. Then right where that is, I'm going back in this fabric here, just catching the back of it. And then I'm coming up. You couldn't even see it because I came up and went through that fold all in one motion. Right here I came out. I'm going into that fabric. There's my needle. I'm going back into the edge and pull that on through. And you can't even tell where I'm stitching, okay? I need to back this one off a bit, come right in the edge, come in this edge here, so I'm in the fold of my binding. Come out, come back in that edge, go in the edge of the binding, come out. And you're just going to work your way around there just like that. And you're not going to have anything really showing when you're doing that because you're coming in underneath this fabric and you're getting right in that fold. So that's the way you're going to do that. Now let's say this is the end. What do I do at the end? Well, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go through that fold again. And then I'm going to come through that edge of that fold and kind of just go underneath here because you're going to have that last stitch. This one is secured tight, as is this one back here. And then I'm just going to come under there again. And this time I'm going to go through my loop. This would already be stitched down, okay? I'm going to go through and do that one more time. And then those of you that have been working with template quilting, you know burying our threads, we're doing it all the time. In this case, it's going to be really easy. We're just going to go back in under here and come down. I would go about 1 inch, pull that out, and then you can cut that because that's secure. And you can see I started clear back here, but you can't really tell it. What's it look like on the front? Pretty much the same thing. So remember, if you start with this, and this is 1/4 inch, you don't have to have fabric in that whole thing. I can still do my 1/4 inch and get a nice looking binding, and I think you're going to find that you really like doing it this way. So start with 2 1/2, fold it in half, and then stitch it on. If you want to stitch it on at 3/8 and it doesn't matter, that will be fine. But that's the way we're going to do our corners to get our mitered corner. Got a little thread sticking up there, and you're going to be able to have that on the front and the back. So I hope this helps you with how you're going to bind your projects, whether it's a quilt or a little wall hanging like this. So again, I'm Donelle McAdams. I encourage you to get the Bound to Fit tool from Sew Steady and to use this method for your projects. Thanks for joining me.